LaRouche-Pac and Executive Intelligence Review have just published an exclusive memo from a group of influentials tied to the Russian government, the Izborsk Club, warning of the strategic consequences of continued agitation in Ukraine. They warn that Ukraine is being transformed into a new hotspot for Europe and the entire world, and into a hotbed of instability and chaos on Russia's borders. The strategic significance of Ukraine today is that the crisis there threatens to become the trigger for the onset of a thermonuclear confrontation between Russia and the United States. Lyndon LaRouche warned on February 3rd that as long as the U.S. continues its current policy direction, the world is threatened with thermonuclear war in the coming month.
What I've been saying since January 1st is that we're now in a countdown toward a thermonuclear war. And what we're in now is just provocations against Russia to try to set up a situation which will trigger a Russian response of the type they want, and then they will immediately launch thermonuclear war. Now, my time scale was saying, well, by the 1st of March, we are already at that time, if not earlier, we are on the verge of actual thermonuclear mutual extermination.
The two statements, translated by EIR and LaRouche-Pac over the past 48 hours, show that despite what is being propagated in the Western media, Russia is on high alert. In the memo by the Izborsk Club, whose members include presidential advisor Sergei Glaziev and retired General Leonid Ivashov, the authors warn first that Ukraine faces the risk of going fascist, with the Western support given to an explicitly neo-Nazi faction of the Euromaidan. That support violates the 1994 US, Russia, Ukraine, UK treaty. According to the Izborsk memo, if that 1994 treaty is violated because one of the parties refuses to come to the table, then the situation will escalate and should be handled like the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. With direct U.S.-Russian bilateral negotiations. When Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov raised the specter of world war at the annual Fecunda Security Conference in early February, Western sources accused Russia of making bellicose statements. However, the memo from the Izborsk Club outlines what Russia perceives as direct threats to its security and territorial integrity. These are threats that have never even been acknowledged by the sources calling Russia's assessment bellicose. Consider the military threat of a creeping coup in Ukraine. The Russian armed forces will be forced out of Crimea and the Black Sea port of Sevastopol. Ukraine and NATO will develop an expanding partnership leading to the appearance of US and NATO bases in Ukraine and Crimea. The unrest will open up the establishment in eastern Ukraine of bases for training terrorists to operate not only in the Caucasus, but in Siberia and the Volga Basin. Finally, the techniques of the Euromaidan will be extended into major Russian cities, especially those with existing ethnic tensions. Despite these obvious threats, the view from Washington, D.C. political circles remains bleak, with congressmen allowing their votes to be used for a larger, very dangerous geopolitical game. On Tuesday, February 11th, 381 members of Congress voted for H-Res 447, authorizing support for the openly fascist opposition forces in Ukraine. In the other exclusive document translated from Russian by EIR, General Leonid Ivashov describes exactly how this game is being played. Officials of the European Union and the U.S. executive branch present everything backwards from reality. It is one of the formulas which Nazi propaganda employed most successfully. They accuse the party that is defending itself of aggression. What we are seeing in Ukraine and in Syria is a Western project, a new kind of war. In both places, you see a clear anti-Russian approach, and as is well known, wars today begin with psychological and information warfare operations. After the information war, they are preparing a land and sea in Ukraine. Keep in mind that under the cover of information commotion, U.S. ships are entering the Black Sea, that is, near Ukraine. They are sending Marines, and they have also begun to deploy more tanks in Europe. After the information war, they are preparing for an operation by land and sea, possibly also by air. General Ivashov concludes, "I assume that the Foreign Ministry understands that we are at war." We present this information here because these are the provocations that lead to world war. There is an active war faction inside the United States, which is using the executive branch and much of the Congress. If the intention is to prevent war, the way to do that is to remove Barack Obama from office. Even if citizens of the United States refuse to believe we are on the path to world war, that is a perception in Russia. And when your potential enemy believes you are at war, you are at war.